The transmission from the Alliance High Command arrived at the worst possible moment. Sergeant Mason Carter, known to his friends and enemies alike as Mace, was just about to dive into a rare moment of peace on his ship, the Athena, a massive cargo hauler converted into a military-grade warship. He stood at the front of the mess hall, watching as the crew filed through, their boots clanging on the metal floors in time to the ship's subtle hum. It had been a long journey from Earth to the border of the Solarian Empire's territory, a place where no human ship had ever dared to venture. This wasn't just a routine mission, it was the first strike of an ongoing campaign to push back against the rapidly expanding Empire, a powerful force that had crushed or absorbed nearly every species it encountered. Humanity was the latest target. "Eat up," Mace called to the tired crew as they filtered out of the mess, their plates heavy with recycled protein and ration packs. "We've got a long day ahead of us." There were groans, eye rolls, and more than a few sighs of resignation. Everyone was exhausted, but there was a sense of pride in their movements. The Athena was crewed by the best of humanity's military elite, a ragtag group of soldiers, scientists, and engineers who had been handpicked for this mission. Some were veterans of brutal wars fought on distant planets. Others were freshly minted recruits, eager to prove their worth. But Mace had no illusions about who was in charge. He was the one who kept them together. Before he could finish his meal, the comm officer, Lieutenant Rhea Voss, burst into the mess hall, eyes wide with panic. "Sergeant, you need to see this." Mace's stomach sank. "What's going on, Lieutenant?" "Alliance Command. They've sent us a direct transmission," Rhea said, and Mace followed her to the command center with growing unease. The holoscreen flickered to life as Mace stepped into the room. On the other side of the transmission was an official-looking officer, garbed in the ornate robes of the Alliance's Central Command. The officer's face was stoic, like a statue chiseled out of marble, with no hint of emotion. "Sergeant Carter," the officer said, his voice carrying authority. "We've just received intelligence that the Solarian Empire is preparing to invade the Xanthos system. You are to proceed immediately to the capital world, Taraxis. You will lead the ground assault." Mace blinked, surprised by the suddenness of the order. "Hold on, sir. I wasn't aware we were authorized for a direct assault. My crew's still recovering from the last engagement. We were told we'd be supporting the larger fleet." The officer's face remained unchanged. "The Empire is growing too strong. A direct strike is the only option. Your ship, your crew, and your expertise are all that stands between us and total defeat. This is now a matter of survival." Mace's jaw tightened. He wasn't new to war, he'd fought in countless battles. He'd led troops in desperate missions before. But this was different. The Empire's military was ruthless, and their technology was far beyond anything humanity had in their arsenal. Sending a ragtag group of soldiers wasn't just reckless, it was suicide. He opened his mouth to protest, but the officer continued, cutting him off. "There's more. The Solarian Empire has assembled their greatest champions for this fight. They are bringing their finest warriors, alien and human alike, into the fray. They will test you, Sergeant. They will test your crew. You may not win, but you must delay their invasion. It's a matter of time." The transmission cut out abruptly, leaving the room heavy with silence. Mace stood frozen for a moment, the weight of the task sinking in. He had always expected this moment, the moment when the war would turn against them, but he had hoped for more preparation, more time. Not this. Not now. Rhea, who had been quietly watching from the console, finally spoke up. "What now, Sergeant?" Mace looked at her, his face grim. "Now, we do what we've always done. We fight. We give them hell." But even as he spoke the words, doubt gnawed at the edges of his thoughts. He knew the odds. He knew what they were facing. They were up against the best of the Empire, an enemy that had conquered entire star systems with overwhelming force, leaving nothing but death and ruin in their wake. And now they were about to face those same warriors head-on. Mace quickly called an emergency crew meeting in the briefing room. The crew filed in, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Mace stood before them, arms crossed, trying to mask his own nervousness. He wasn't a strategist. He was a soldier, trained to lead by example, not to make impossible decisions. But this was no ordinary mission. This was their last chance. "Listen up," Mace began, his voice commanding but carrying a touch of uncertainty. "We've just received orders from High Command. The Solarian Empire is gearing up for a full-scale invasion of the Xanthos system. We are to head to the capital world, Taraxis, and stop their advance." A murmur of disbelief rippled through the room. Taraxis was one of the Empire's most fortified worlds, its defenses stronger than any human force could hope to breach. The idea that they would be sent to attack such a heavily defended planet was almost laughable. Mace held up his hand, silencing the chatter. "I know what you're all thinking. It sounds insane. And honestly, it might be. But here's the thing, we're not going to fight their fleet. We're not going to fight their full military. We're going to fight their champions." The room fell silent again. This time, the crew didn't look surprised. They looked confused, unsure of how to process the news. "Champions?" Lieutenant Voss asked. "You mean like, gladiators? Prize fighters?" Mace nodded. "Exactly. The Empire sends its greatest warriors, its most dangerous soldiers, to challenge us. And when they fail, they send more. We're going to need every trick in the book to survive. But I'm not asking for a victory. I'm asking for survival. We delay their forces long enough, and we may buy time for the rest of humanity to rally." One of the engineers, Corporal Ruiz, raised his hand. "Wait a minute. You're telling me we're going to face off against champions, like, actual champions? What, are we supposed to take them down with our fists?" Mace smirked despite the gravity of the situation. "Pretty much. But we're not going to do it the traditional way. We've got one thing the Empire doesn't, imagination. And if we're lucky, a few tricks up our sleeves." The crew exchanged looks. Some were skeptical, others unsure, but all of them were willing to follow Mace's lead. They had no choice. Humanity's survival hinged on them. As the meeting adjourned, Mace found himself standing alone for a moment, staring out of the observation window at the stars. He didn't have all the answers. He didn't even have a solid plan. But he did know one thing, humanity wasn't going to just roll over. They were going to fight back, with everything they had. His crew was the best humanity had to offer. If anyone could make the impossible happen, it was them. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fight for survival was about to begin. The Athena cut through the void of space like a shadow, cloaked in the blackness of deep space. Mace stood at the command bridge, watching the star-filled expanse. His fingers drummed lightly on the armrest of his chair, a nervous habit he had tried to stop long ago. It was the silence that was getting to him, the weight of the situation pressing down with an unspoken intensity. In less than 6 hours, they would reach Taraxis. And then, all hell would break loose. He glanced at the hollow screen, which flickered to life, showing the tactical map of the Taraxis system. The planet was surrounded by a dense ring of defensive platforms, warships, and what appeared to be an enormous orbital station. The data indicated that a small fleet of Empire vessels was already positioned around the planet, clearly preparing for some kind of offensive. From their vantage point, Athena was still far enough from the system's gravitational pull to be undetected, but that wouldn't last long. Behind him, Lieutenant Voss was busy monitoring communications, her sharp eyes flicking between screens and the data pouring in. She didn't look up as Mace approached, her voice steady as she spoke. "I've been running constant scans on the system. The Empire is on high alert, but they still don't know we're here. We've got the element of surprise, if we don't waste it." Mace nodded grimly. "And when they find us?" Voss turned her head, her expression unreadable. "We'll be facing their best soldiers. The Empire's champions." She added the word like it was a curse. The idea of humanity, even a small contingent of elite soldiers, taking on the Empire's greatest warriors seemed laughable at best, suicidal at worst. But there was no turning back now. The orders had been given, and they had no choice but to carry them out. "Yeah, and that's why we need a plan that doesn't get us all killed," Mace muttered under his breath. "We need to draw them out. Separate them. Make them think we're more than we are." Tasha Kim, his sharp-witted second-in-command, was already working on a simulation in the corner of the bridge. She was one of those rare minds who could see through complex problems with ease, always thinking several steps ahead. The only thing she lacked was the patience to deal with bureaucracy, a trait that Mace had learned to appreciate. "We need to throw them off balance," she said as she zoomed in on the map of the Taraxis system. "I've been thinking. They'll expect a direct assault, especially with the report about us coming through. But if we hit them where they least expect it, they might second-guess their attack plan." Mace raised an eyebrow. "What do you have in mind?" Kim's fingers flew across the controls, highlighting a small, seemingly insignificant moon just outside the range of the Empire's orbital defense systems. "Here. This moon is uncharted, practically invisible to their long-range sensors. We could use it as a staging point, a place to regroup and plan. And if we hit them quickly, we might be able to draw out a few of their champions, engage them on our terms. If we can isolate just one or two of them, then we stand a chance." Mace stared at the holographic moon, the small chunk of rock that might be their salvation. It wasn't much, but it was something. It gave them a fighting chance. "All right," Mace said, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders. "Get the crew ready. We'll make a move for that moon as soon as we're within range. I want everything prepped for a rapid strike, no second chances." The crew went into action, moving with the precision that only military professionals could. Mace watched them work, admiring their discipline. They were nervous, just like him, but they were ready. And that, in the end, was all that mattered. As the hours passed, the tension on board the Athena grew. The countdown to engagement ticked away slowly, each minute stretching into eternity. Mace spent most of the time pacing the command deck, his thoughts racing. The Empire's champions, how were they going to stand up against them? The thought lingered in his mind, and no matter how many times he pushed it away, it always returned. The champions were the best of the best, each one a living weapon, a master of combat, tactics, and strategy. The Athena was no slouch in the firepower department, but against an Empire champion, it would be a matter of luck, resourcefulness, and sheer will to survive. Then, the call came in. A single alert pinged across the bridge, followed by Rhea's voice. "Sergeant, we've detected Empire ships coming into the system. They're converging on the moon. They've already seen us." Mace's heart skipped a beat. "How many?" "4, at least," Rhea responded, her fingers flying over her controls. "But there's something strange. One of the ships has an energy signature unlike anything we've encountered before. It's massive, looks like a battleship, but different." "That's their flagship," Mace said, his mind racing. "The Solarian Empire doesn't send its best without backup. That flagship is their command vessel. And that energy signature, it could be one of their champions. Should we abort?" Rhea asked, her voice almost too quiet. Mace took a deep breath, his eyes narrowing. There was no question of turning back. "Not now. No. We proceed as planned. We draw them out, get them into a position where we can engage. And once we do, we pick them off one by one. We don't need to win a war. We just need to survive this battle. For now." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, everything felt uncertain. But in that uncertainty, there was also resolve. This was what they had been trained for, the test, the moment when survival depended on more than just raw power or technology. This was their moment to prove that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the greatest forces in the galaxy. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Mace ordered. "Rhea, get us into position. Tasha, I want everything ready to deploy the moment we make our move." The Athena hummed as it altered its course, flying low and fast toward the moon. The planet Taraxis loomed in the distance, a giant waiting to strike. Mace's mind sharpened. This wasn't about taking on the Empire. This was about surviving long enough to make them rethink everything they thought they knew about humanity. And then, the stars seemed to burst into motion. The Empire's ships moved in close, their massive forms casting shadows over the dark expanse of space. Mace could feel the tension in the crew's movements, the building anticipation of the fight ahead. The flagship moved toward the moon, followed by its smaller escorts. They were getting closer, and the Athena was now just outside their detection range. Status? Mace barked, not taking his eyes off the flagship. We're within range of the moon, Sergeant. We're undetected, but we have one shot, Rhea said, her fingers dancing over the controls. Do it, Mace ordered, and in an instant, the Athena lurched into motion, diving toward the moon with a sudden burst of speed. The Empire's ships, momentarily caught off guard, scrambled to adjust. Mace's plan was simple: hit fast, hit hard, and make sure they stayed confused long enough to survive. He had no delusions of victory, only the hope that they could break the Empire's overconfidence. They were coming, and now they would know what it meant to face humanity's finest. But as the Athena raced toward the moon, Mace felt that old familiar feeling, the one he hadn't experienced in a long time. The one that reminded him that, for all their advanced technology, for all the overwhelming power of the Empire, humans had something more valuable than firepower. They had heart. And sometimes, that was enough. The Athena shuddered as the moon loomed closer, its surface barely visible in the dim light of the distant stars. Mace could feel the tension building, every nerve in his body primed for the upcoming clash. His crew had worked tirelessly to prepare, but now it was time to see if their training, their courage, would hold up under the weight of the Empire's wrath. All systems are green, Rhea's voice echoed through the bridge, steady but tinged with a quiet nervousness that wasn't typical of the communications officer. We're close to the moon's gravity well. The Empire's fleet is still on our tail, but they haven't realized yet that we're planning a full assault. Mace nodded, but his thoughts were elsewhere. The Empire's ships had closed the distance fast, their shadows looming over the moon's barren surface. Even with their superior technology, their commanders hadn't yet grasped the significance of the Athena's arrival. That was their first mistake. Hold position for now, Mace ordered. Let them get close. We need them to think they're winning. He could almost hear the skeptical glances shared between the crew members, but no one voiced their doubts. It wasn't just the ship that had to be ready, it was their minds that had to be prepared to face the champions of the Empire. Then, it came, a single burst of static on the communication channels. The entire room went still, each member of the crew instinctively bracing themselves. A new transmission came through, louder than the static and almost too clear to be anything other than a direct message. We know you're there, the voice said, cold and calm, but with an underlying threat that resonated in every word. This is the Elder, champion of the Solarian Empire. Surrender now, and we will spare your pathetic lives. Resist, and you will meet your doom. Mace's lips curled into a tight smile. There it was. They had drawn them in. Elder, Mace muttered under his breath. It was the title given to the most formidable of the Empire's champions, veterans of countless battles, unbreakable warriors who could crush entire armies with their raw strength and mastery of tactics. The Empire's propaganda had built them into legends, feared across the galaxy, invincible in their own right. And now, Mace Carter and his crew were supposed to face him on equal terms. Rhea, can you isolate their fleet? Mace asked, his voice controlled, but beneath it, there was a simmering edge of excitement. It had been years since he had faced an adversary who made his blood boil with the promise of a challenge. Rhea's fingers flew across the console. I've got a signal lock. Their flagship, the Vengeance, is right at the front. It's the biggest ship in the fleet, but there's a small vessel with a higher energy signature nearby. It looks like it's preparing to detach and engage us personally. Mace's heart skipped a beat. That was the Elder's ship, the champion's vessel. Deploy all fighters, Mace commanded. Prepare to engage. The crew sprang into action. The Athena's hangars burst open, and the fleet of small fighter ships, cobbled together from humanity's best and brightest engineers, shot into the black, their engines flaring against the emptiness. Mace could see their positions from the command deck, tight clusters of small ships darting in and out of the moon's shadow, setting themselves up for the inevitable clash. Their job was simple: draw fire, keep the Empire's forces distracted, and allow the Athena and its crew to make the most of their one chance. "Sir, the Elder's ship is coming into range," Tasha Kim reported, her eyes flicking back and forth between the screens. "It's big. It's fast. It's coming for us." Mace's breath caught in his throat. There was no time to overthink this. If they hesitated, they were dead. "All right, everyone. Let's show them what humans can do." The Athena shot forward, its engines roaring to life, pushing the ship with a sudden burst of speed that sent everyone bracing themselves against their seats. The fighters followed closely, darting in a wide arc around the flagship and the advancing champion's vessel. The Elder's ship was a war machine, sleek and deadly, with energy weapons that could disintegrate a ship in a matter of seconds. But they weren't going to face him head-on. Not yet. Mace watched the tactical display as the fighters drew closer to the Elder's ship. The plan was simple: buy time, confuse them, and force the Empire to waste their resources on a fight they hadn't anticipated. Mace's fighters would become decoys, baiting the Empire's forces into a reckless pursuit, and then the Athena would strike where it hurt the most. "Hold fire," Mace said, his voice low and steady, though his pulse was racing. "Wait until they're within range." The tension in the air was thick. The Empire's fleet continued to close the distance, their warships moving in tight formations. Every moment that passed felt like an eternity. And then, without warning, the first shot was fired. A single burst of blue energy, bright and powerful, streaked through space and struck one of the human fighters. The ship exploded in a fireball, shattering into a million pieces before it even had a chance to react. The fighter had barely fired a shot before it was vaporized, and in that brief moment, the rest of the fleet realized their mistake. Mace's heart hammered in his chest. The Empire had just made the one mistake they could not afford: they had underestimated humanity. "Now!" Mace shouted. The Athena surged forward, its guns opening fire. Missiles, lasers, and plasma blasts shot through space, lighting up the blackness like a brilliant firestorm. The Empire's ships scrambled, trying to adjust their defenses, but the Athena was already on them. It wasn't a fair fight by any means. The Empire had the technology, the sheer firepower to obliterate the Athena, but the humans had something far more dangerous: the element of surprise and sheer unpredictability. The fighters swooped in, drawing fire, darting in and out with precision. Their mission was clear: distract, confuse, and harass the Empire's forces. Some were torn apart in the process, but each death was a calculated risk, a sacrifice to buy time for the real strike. Mace gripped the armrest of his chair, his knuckles white as the Athena bucked under fire. The shield systems held strong for now, but it wouldn't last long. "Bring us around, Rhea," Mace ordered. "We need to flank the flagship." The ship groaned as the engines pushed it into a hard turn, the massive form of the Empire's flagship, the Vengeance, coming into view. It was even larger up close, a monolithic behemoth floating in space, its guns aimed toward them. The Elder's ship broke off from the main formation and headed straight for the Athena. The two ships were on a collision course. Mace's heart raced. They had come to face the Empire's greatest champion, but Mace wasn't going to back down. If this was the final battle, if it came down to one last stand, then he would make sure it counted. "Prepare for close combat," Mace barked. "All turrets, fire on my mark." The Athena's turrets turned, swinging into position. The energy shield shimmered, absorbing the impact of incoming blasts as the ship moved in closer, their fighters keeping the Empire's ships occupied. It was all or nothing now. The moment of truth was at hand. Hold," Mace whispered under his breath. His eyes locked onto the approaching Elder's ship. The battle was about to reach its crescendo, and for the first time in years, Mace felt the thrill of it. There was no running. No backing down. Only one side would walk away from this fight. And he intended for it to be humanity. Now, you said. The Athena shuddered as it blasted through the void, its systems screaming under the onslaught of enemy fire. Mace's grip tightened on the command chair, his body lurching with every impact against the hull. The lights on the bridge flickered as the ship's shields fought to absorb the brutal energy waves that raked across the vessel. Outside, the Empire's flagship, the Vengeance, loomed like a monstrous shadow, its guns blazing in relentless fury. The Elder ship was right in front of them now, the massive form of the Solarian Champion's warship cutting through the blackness. It was coming straight for them, bigger, faster, and armed with weapons that could obliterate them in an instant. But it wasn't the size of the ship that bothered Mace. It was the man inside that ship. The Elder. The embodiment of the Empire's superiority. He was known for his ruthless efficiency, his legendary status as a warrior who had toppled entire fleets without breaking a sweat. And now, Mace had to take him down. The Athena was far from a match for the Vengeance in raw firepower, but what it lacked in brute strength, it made up for with speed, cunning, and sheer audacity. Mace had always believed that humans had a unique ability to think outside the box, to improvise, and to make use of situations that seemed hopeless. This was no exception. He trusted in his crew, in their ability to turn the impossible into a series of victories. Rhea, get us out of this mess. I need a clear path to the flagship. Mace barked. Rhea's hands moved with the precision of a surgeon, navigating the Athena through a barrage of missiles and energy blasts. The ship's hull groaned as it swerved and twisted, barely avoiding enemy fire. The crew worked as one, the quiet buzz of their efforts filling the command deck, but their determination was clear. The Athena pulled into a tight evasive maneuver, dodging a deadly blast that would have pierced the ship's outer hull, and Mace's pulse quickened. Time was running out. Every second they wasted was another second closer to their doom. He could feel the Elder ship bearing down on them, the enemy's energy weapons locking onto their position. On my mark, Mace said, his voice steely, we'll make our move. All guns, all torpedoes, everything we've got. We hit them hard, and we hit them fast. The crew members gave their silent acknowledgments. They understood the stakes. This wasn't just about taking down the flagship, this was about proving that humanity, against all odds, could challenge the might of an empire. Mace's hand hovered over the command console. One wrong move, and they would be torn apart. But if they did this right, if they could create the perfect opening, if they could disrupt the Elder's perfect plan, then victory, improbable as it seemed, might be within their grasp. Mark! Mace shouted. The Athena shot forward, engines roaring as it surged toward the Vengeance at maximum speed. The Empire's ships attempted to adjust, their firepower escalating, but it was too late. The Athena's turrets erupted with devastating force, streaking through the void and hitting the Vengeance's shields. The flagship's defensive systems flared, but the concentrated barrage from the Athena's guns kept them off balance, disorienting the crew aboard the giant ship. Now, Tasha! Deploy the EMP! Mace ordered. Tasha's hands flew across the controls, and in an instant, the Athena launched an electromagnetic pulse directly toward the Vengeance. It was a last-ditch weapon, experimental, but devastating when used at the right time. The pulse shot through the space between the two ships and detonated with a brilliance that lit up the darkness like a supernova. The pulse struck the flagship directly, sending waves of energy rippling through the ship's systems. The Vengeance shook, its weapons systems momentarily disabled, its shields flickering. The Empire's championship was no longer invincible. We've got a breach! Tasha called out. Their engines are down. Their shields are down. Mace's heart raced. This was it. This was their chance. But the battle was far from over. The Elder ship wasn't defeated yet, not by a long shot. Take us in close, Mace ordered, his voice calm but intense. We need to board that ship. The crew's faces tightened with resolve as they executed the plan with precision. The Athena dove toward the Vengeance, its hull shaking as enemy fire continued to pour in. Fighters scrambled to meet them, but the Athena was too fast, too nimble. It cut through their defenses like a knife through butter. And then they were there, the Athena docked with the Vengeance, the crew rapidly donning their combat gear. The air was thick with tension. Each member of the crew knew the risks. Boarding an enemy ship meant facing not just overwhelming numbers, but the Empire's most dangerous warriors. The Elder wasn't alone. He had an army of elite soldiers at his side. "Let's do this," Mace muttered, securing his helmet. "For humanity." With a metallic hiss, the airlock doors opened, and the soldiers rushed out, weapons raised, their hearts beating faster with every step. The corridors of the Vengeance were eerily silent, illuminated by dim emergency lights. The sound of combat boots against metal echoed in the halls as they advanced, moving with precision, checking every corner. Then, they found them. A group of Empire soldiers, the first line of defense, turned the corner and saw them. The tension was palpable as both sides froze, momentarily locking eyes. The Empire soldiers were massive, their armor gleaming under the dim lights. Their faces were cold, emotionless. The champions of the Empire. But Mace wasn't intimidated. The Empire's champions had never fought against humanity, against the grit, the resourcefulness, the ability to adapt under pressure. A shot rang out, and the battle began. The Athena's crew moved with lethal efficiency, using every advantage they had. The Empire's soldiers were strong, trained to kill with ruthless efficiency, but they hadn't expected the unrelenting determination of the human crew. The battle was brutal, close quarters, hand-to-hand combat, blaster fire ricocheting off walls, but Mace and his team held their ground. It wasn't about technology or numbers. It was about heart. It was about what made humans dangerous and unyielding will to survive, to fight against impossible odds. Mace was at the front, his mind sharp, his body moving on instinct. He took down one soldier, then another. A fist met his jaw, but it didn't slow him down. He pushed forward, never faltering. His crew followed suit, fighting like they had nothing to lose because, in that moment, they didn't. The Elder's voice crackled through the intercom. "You think you can defeat me? I am the might of the Empire. You will kneel before." But Mace wasn't listening. The time for speeches was over. The time for action had arrived. He pushed forward, through the chaos, toward the heart of the ship. And there, at the center of the Vengeance, stood the Elder. His massive form, clad in gleaming armor, radiated power. He was everything the Empire had promised, a living weapon. But Mace wasn't afraid. Not anymore. The two locked eyes, and in that instant, Mace knew what he had to do. He wasn't fighting just for survival. He was fighting for something more. For humanity. For every person who had ever been told they weren't strong enough, smart enough, or capable enough to stand up to the universe's greatest powers. "You may be a champion," Mace said, his voice steady. "But we are humanity. And we don't kneel." The fight was fierce, blades clashing, fists flying, both combatants giving everything they had. The Elder was a juggernaut, but Mace was fast, relentless, refusing to back down. Blow after blow, they clashed, neither giving an inch. Mace could feel the pressure building, could hear his crew pushing forward, but this battle wasn't just physical. It was mental, emotional, the weight of the fight making every second stretch out longer than it should. Finally, with a roar, Mace pushed the Elder back, knocking him off balance. The human crew surged forward, overpowering the rest of the Empire's soldiers. The Empire's champion fell to the floor, breathing heavily. Mace stood over him, chest heaving. This is what happens when you underestimate humanity. The Vengeance had fallen. The Empire's champion had been defeated. And humanity had won. The Athena's crew gathered, battered but unbroken, as the Empire's ship was taken. Mace looked out at the stars, the victory sinking in. They had done it. Against all odds, they had defeated the Empire's finest. But it wasn't just about this battle. It was about what they had proven, not just to the Empire, but to the galaxy. Humanity could never be underestimated again.